I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped onto the sand and didn't feel at peace. That beach house had always greeted me like an old friend, salt in the air, gulls crying overhead, the steady hush of waves smoothing out whatever knots life had tied in me. I'd bought it decades ago, back when my knees were stronger, and my heart still believed rest was something you earned by giving enough of yourself away. This visit was meant to be quiet, just a few weeks to breathe, to listen to the ocean instead of other people's needs. But as I walked up the wooden steps, suitcase in hand, I heard laughter spilling through the open windows. Loud laughter, too loud, the kind that doesn't belong to people who are visiting politely. I paused at the door. Inside, towels were draped over my chairs. Shoes I didn't recognize were piled by the wall. Someone had moved my framed photographs, my late husband's smile, my children when they were small, to make room for beach bags and coolers. And then I saw her. My daughter-in-law stood near the kitchen island, a drink in her hand, surrounded by her parents and siblings like she was hosting something she owned. She didn't notice me at first. No one did. I stood there quietly, feeling strangely invisible in my own home. When she finally turned, her face tightened, not with surprise, but irritation. She leaned toward her mother and said something under her breath. Then she laughed. "Did no one tell her?" she said louder this time, glancing in my direction. "We're already packed in here." The room went quiet, awkward, and sharp. I felt every eye land on me, curious, assessing, dismissive. I was suddenly very aware of my gray hair, my simple clothes, the way age makes people decide your worth for you before you ever speak. I smiled. "I didn't realize you had company," I said gently. She sighed, the sound heavy with exaggeration. "Well, we do. And honestly, there's just no space right now." Her father smirked. Someone chuckled. No one corrected her. I looked around the room that still carried my memories in its walls and felt something settle deep in my chest, not anger. Clarity. "Oh," I said softly. "I see." My daughter-in-law tilted her head, studying me like an inconvenience she hadn't planned for. "Maybe you could stay somewhere else. Just until we're done." Until we're done. As if I were a guest waiting my turn in my own life. For a moment, I considered explaining. Telling them this was my house, that I paid for it, that I had keys because I belonged here. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up my suitcase again and nodded. "It's okay, dear," I said calmly. "I won't be in the way." Relief washed over her face too quickly. I walked back down the steps, the ocean breeze brushing my cheeks, and sat on the low wooden bench by the shore. The waves rolled in and out like they always had, patient and unbothered. That's when I made a decision. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one. Just a quiet choice born from years of being underestimated. They thought I was leaving because I had nowhere to stand. They had no idea I was about to remind them exactly whose ground this was. And once I did, nothing in that house would ever feel the same again. I sat on that bench longer than I planned to. The ocean has a way of slowing your thoughts until only the truth remains. I watched the tide creep forward, erase its own footprints, and pull back again, patient, deliberate, unstoppable. I'd learned something from the sea over the years. It never argues. It just moves things where they belong. From the porch, I could hear music now. Someone had turned it up, loud and careless. Laughter followed, bursting out in waves. Not once did anyone come looking for me. Not once did anyone ask if I was all right. That hurt more than her words. I reached into my purse and felt the familiar edge of my key ring. My beach house key. The same one I'd handed to my son years ago, just in case. Just in case had turned into entitlement, and entitlement into audacity. I stood and brushed the sand from my coat. When I walked back inside, no one noticed at first. They were busy arguing over what to grill for dinner, whether the sun was too strong, who had finished the wine. Ordinary conversations, the kind that happen when people believe nothing will interrupt them. I cleared my throat. The room stilled. "I'm going to head out for a bit," I said pleasantly. "But I'll be back this evening." My daughter-in-law nodded quickly. "That's probably for the best." Her mother smiled in approval. I returned that smile, slow and polite. "While I'm gone, I just need one small thing." They waited. "Please don't move anything else," I continued. "Some of those items are irreplaceable." She rolled her eyes. "Relax. We're not touching your old stuff." Old stuff. I walked to the hallway closet and opened it. Inside, behind the beach umbrellas and folding chairs, was a small metal box. I'd installed the safe years ago, after my husband passed, something he'd insisted on long before I understood why. I took it out quietly. No one asked questions. No one cared. Back outside, I locked the front door behind me, not out of anger, but habit. I got into my car and drove toward town, my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't cry. I stopped at the Marina Cafe and ordered tea. The waitress asked if I was visiting. "No," I said, "I'm returning." After that, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a property manager I trusted, the second to my lawyer, the third to a service company that handled access codes and digital locks. Each conversation was brief, calm, professional. By the time the sun dipped low and painted the water gold, everything was in motion. I returned to the house just after sunset. Music was still playing, laughter still spilling out. But when they tried to open the door for their evening walk, the handle didn't budge. Confusion rippled through the room. I stood on the porch, keys in hand, and knocked once. Their faces fell when they saw me. "Oh," I said softly, "I'm home." And in that moment, I could already feel the balance shifting slowly, surely, like the tide. At first, they thought it was a joke. My daughter-in-law laughed nervously and twisted the handle again, harder this time. The door didn't move. Her smile slipped just a little. "That's weird," she muttered. "Did someone lock it?" Her father stepped forward, annoyed. Must be swollen from the humidity. He yanked the handle. Nothing. I stood there calmly, the porch light glowing behind me, the ocean murmuring at my back like an old witness. "What's going on?" her mother asked, her voice sharp now. I held up my keys. I had the locks updated. The silence that followed was deliciously heavy. "You can't do that," my daughter-in-law said, blinking at me. "We're inside." "Yes," I replied. "In my house." Her eyes widened. "You didn't have to be dramatic." I smiled faintly. I wasn't. My son finally appeared from the kitchen, his face pale. He looked from me to the locked door, then back to me again. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm taking my home back," I said simply. His wife scoffed. "This is unbelievable. We came here to relax." "So did I answered. "And yet, here we are." Her mother crossed her arms. "This is no way to treat family." I met her gaze evenly. Family doesn't tell someone there's no room for them in their own home. The porch light flickered as a breeze rolled in. Inside, the fire still burned. Outside, the air was cool and clean. "You expect us to just leave?" my daughter-in-law demanded. "I expect you to respect boundaries," I said, something I should have insisted on long ago. My son stepped closer to the door. "Mom, let's talk about this." "We are talking," I said gently. "I'm just done being talked over." For a moment, no one spoke. Then her brother laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "This is ridiculous. You're an old woman throwing a tantrum." I turned my head slightly and looked at him, not with anger, with pity. "You'll understand one day," I said, "if you're lucky enough to live long enough." That's when my daughter-in-law's tone changed. "If you don't unlock this door right now, we'll call the police." I nodded. "You're welcome to." That stunned them. I took a seat on the porch chair and folded my hands in my lap. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," I added. "Everything I've done is perfectly legal." My son's shoulders sagged. Minutes passed. Voices inside rose, overlapping, frantic. Someone finally grabbed their phone. I didn't stop them, because I knew something they didn't. This house had a history, paperwork, records, and once authority got involved, the truth wouldn't be on their side. As flashing lights appeared in the distance, my daughter-in-law stared at me through the glass. For the first time, she looked unsure. And I realized this wasn't revenge. This was a lesson she had never expected to be taught. The red and blue lights washed over the beach like an uneasy sunrise. I stood up slowly as the patrol car pulled into the driveway, its tires crunching against the gravel. 2 officers stepped out, young enough to be my grandson's friends, their faces neutral but alert. Inside the house, the shouting stopped all at once, as if someone had cut the power. My daughter-in-law pressed her face to the glass door. Her confidence had drained away, leaving something brittle behind. The taller officer approached me first. "Ma'am, we got a call about a domestic dispute. Everyone okay out here?" "I'm just fine," I said calmly, a bit disappointed, but fine. He nodded and glanced at the locked door. "And the people inside? Their family," I said. but they're also guests who refuse to leave when asked. The shorter officer raised an eyebrow. Is this your property? Yes, I answered, handing over a neat folder I'd kept tucked under my arm. Deed, tax records, utility bills, all in my name. He took it, flipping through with growing interest. Inside, my daughter-in-law started pounding on the glass. Officer, she locked us in. She's harassing us. The taller officer turned toward the door. Ma'am, please step back. We'll speak with you shortly. Her father appeared behind her, red-faced. This is elder abuse, he snapped. She's confused. This place was meant for my daughter. I almost laughed, but didn't. Instead, I let the younger officer keep reading. Ma'am, he said to me gently, did you change the locks today? I did, I replied, after I was told there was no room for me in my own home. The officers exchanged a look. That true, the taller one called through the door. My son hesitated. Then, softly, she wanted her family to stay. The officer's voice hardened just a touch. That's not an answer, sir. Silence. I could see it then, my son's old habit of shrinking when things got uncomfortable. He'd done it as a boy when he broke a neighbor's window and hoped I'd smooth it over. I always did back then. Not tonight. The shorter officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, legally speaking, you're within your rights. You can deny access to anyone if you're the sole owner. My daughter-in-law's eyes went wide. You can't be serious. I'm afraid we are, the officer said. We'll need everyone inside to gather their belongings and vacate the property. Chaos erupted. Her mother began crying loudly. Her brother cursed. Someone knocked over a chair. My daughter-in-law spun toward my son. Do something. He looked at me then, not angry, not defensive, just tired. Mom, he said quietly through the glass, why didn't you ever tell me you felt like this? I swallowed hard. Because I thought love meant enduring, I said. Turns out, love also means honesty. They were escorted out one by one, carrying bags and shoes and wounded pride. No one met my eyes, except my daughter-in-law. As she passed me, she hissed, You planned this. I met her gaze steadily. No, dear, I prepared. When the last car pulled away and the lights faded, the beach returned to its quiet rhythm. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But as I sat down by the fire, my phone buzzed with a message from my son. Just 3 words. We need to talk. And I knew the hardest part of this story was still ahead. That message sat on my phone like a small weight on my chest. We need to talk. I didn't answer right away. I set the phone face down on the coffee table and listened to the ocean instead. Waves don't rush you. They come when they come, and they leave when they must. I figured conversations should work the same way. By morning, the house smelled like salt air and fresh coffee. I had slept better than I expected, deep, dreamless sleep, the kind I hadn't had in years. Still, my hands trembled slightly as I wrapped them around my mug. Around 10, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Just one this time. My son stepped out alone. He looked smaller without his wife beside him. Older, too, his shoulders sagged the way they did when he was a teenager coming home after doing something he knew was wrong. I opened the door before he could knock. "Mom," he said softly. "Come in," I replied. "You must be tired." He followed me into the living room, glancing around as if seeing the house for the first time. The family photos were still on the wall, him as a gap-toothed boy, our late dog sprawled on the sand, his father smiling in a way that still made my heart ache. He sat on the edge of the couch. I stayed standing. "I didn't know it was this bad," he began. "The things she said, the way they acted." I folded my arms, not in anger, but in self-protection. "You heard them. You didn't stop them." He winced. I didn't want to cause a scene. I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Funny how scenes only matter when the wrong person is hurt. He rubbed his face. "She's under a lot of stress. Her family relies on her." "And you?" I asked. "Who do you rely on?" The question landed harder than I intended. He stared at the floor for a long moment. "I thought you were okay," he admitted. "You always seemed strong." "I was," I said gently, "but strong doesn't mean invisible." That finally made him look up. "I didn't raise you to let anyone treat people this way," I continued. "And I didn't raise you to let someone treat me this way either." His voice cracked. "I never meant for you to feel pushed out." "But I was," I said, "little by little. A joke here, a comment there, until yesterday, when it wasn't even subtle anymore." He swallowed hard. "She says you're trying to control us." I shook my head. "No, son. I'm finally letting go." That scared him more than anger ever could. I could see it in his eyes, the realization that I wasn't begging, bargaining, or smoothing things over this time. "I love you," I said, reaching for his hand. "But love doesn't mean surrendering my dignity." Tears slipped down his cheek. "What happens now?" I squeezed his hand once, then let go. "That," I said quietly, "depends on what you're willing to see." He left not long after, conflicted and silent. As his car disappeared down the road, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't from my son. It was from his wife, and it made my stomach drop. I didn't open her message right away. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering, my reflection faintly visible in the glass. For a moment, I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who rushed to explain herself, to soften every edge, to apologize even when she'd done nothing wrong. That woman was very tired. So I set the phone down and went outside. The tide was low, the sand smooth and cold beneath my feet. I walked slowly, letting the wind tug at my sweater, letting my thoughts settle. When I finally returned to the house, an hour later, I felt steady enough to read whatever she'd sent. It was longer than I expected. "You embarrassed us. You humiliated my family in front of the police. My husband is angry with me, and this is your fault." I exhaled slowly. There it was, not apology, not reflection, just blame neatly folded into sentences. I typed one response and erased it, typed another. Erased that too. Finally, I sent only this. I didn't embarrass anyone. I protected myself. 3 minutes passed. Then my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I answered. "You've always hated me," she snapped without greeting. I held the phone a few inches away from my ear. "No," I said evenly. "I was just afraid of you." That stopped her. Afraid of confrontation. Afraid of losing my son. Afraid of being labeled difficult or dramatic or old. Fear had kept me quiet far longer than love ever should have. "You had no right," she said, her voice sharper now. "That house was meant to be ours someday." "Someday," I repeated, "but yesterday it was mine. You made me look like a monster." "No," I said softly. "You showed yourself. I just didn't hide it for you." Silence stretched between us. I imagined her pacing, rehearsing arguments she'd used on others. When she spoke again, her tone changed, sweet, controlled. "Let's be reasonable," she said. "We can move past this, for your son's sake." There it was, the lever she always pulled. "I am being reasonable," I replied. "That's why I'm setting boundaries," she scoffed. "At your age," I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Especially at my age." She hung up on me. I sat down heavily, my heart pounding, but not from fear, from clarity. That afternoon, I did something I should have done years earlier. I called my lawyer, not to start a war, but to end confusion. We talked about documents, permissions, future planning, about making things clear while I was still able to speak for myself. By the time we hung up, the sun was dipping low, painting the walls gold. For the first time, I wasn't planning around everyone else's comfort. I was planning for peace. That evening, another message came through. This one was from my son. "She says you're cutting us off." I closed my eyes and leaned back in the chair. No, I thought. I'm cutting the rope that's been tightening around my neck. I typed slowly, choosing each word like a stone placed carefully in a river. "I'm not cutting you off. I'm standing up." The typing dots appeared almost instantly and then disappeared. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. The story my daughter-in-law told herself was about to collide with the truth. The truth has a way of arriving quietly, long before it makes any noise. 2 days passed without a word from either of them. No calls, no messages, just the ocean doing its patient work outside my windows, and me learning how to sit with my own thoughts without rushing to fix anything. On the third morning, there was a knock at the door. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. My daughter-in-law stood there alone this time. No suitcase, no sunglasses, no audience. Her posture was stiff, like someone bracing for impact. "I need to talk," she said. "So do I replied, stepping aside. She didn't sit. She paced. "I spoke to a lawyer," she announced, arms crossed. "You can't just shut us out. My husband has rights." I nodded slowly. "So do I," her jaw tightened. "You're tearing this family apart." I met her eyes. Families don't fall apart because someone speaks up. They fall apart because someone stays silent too long. She laughed, sharp and brittle. You're acting like a victim. No, I said. I'm acting like a woman who knows what she owns: her home, her life, and her self-respect. She stopped pacing. That house will be ours eventually, she said, lowering her voice. You're just delaying the inevitable. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a slim folder. I used to think that way, I said, that everything I built was just a placeholder for someone else's future. I placed the folder on the table between us. She stared at it. What's that? She asked. Clarity. Inside were copies of documents, updated ownership details, living arrangements, legal instructions, not revenge, not punishment, just decisions made without fear. Her face drained of color as she flipped through them. You can't do this, she whispered. I already have, I said gently. She looked up at me then, not with anger, but something closer to panic. Your son won't forgive you. I'm not asking him to choose, I replied. I'm asking him to grow. She snapped the folder shut. You think this makes you powerful? I thought for a moment. No, I said. It makes me free. She left without another word. That evening, my son finally called. His voice was tired. Why didn't you tell me things were this serious? I tried, I said, but you weren't ready to hear it. He was quiet for a long time. She's furious, he admitted. I know. She says you're punishing her. I'm protecting myself. Another pause, then softer. I don't know how to fix this. I looked out at the horizon, where the sky met the sea in a thin silver line. You don't have to fix it tonight, I said, but you do have to decide who you want to be. After we hung up, I sat alone as darkness crept in. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what they might do next, because the hardest part, the moment of choosing myself, was already behind me. And the consequences of that choice were about to reveal something neither of them expected. The hardest truths don't arrive with shouting, they arrive with silence. A week went by before I heard from my son again. In that time, the house felt different, not empty, but settled, like a place that finally knew who it belonged to. On Sunday morning, I received a message. Can I come alone? I read it twice before replying. Yes. He arrived just after noon. No wife, no defensiveness rehearsed on the drive over. Just my boy, older now, shoulders heavier, eyes tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd once done his homework, while I peeled apples for pie. I didn't know how bad it was, he said finally. I stirred my tea. I know. She talks about you like you're temporary, he continued, staring into his cup. Like you're in the way of our future. I didn't answer right away. I let it happen, he said quietly, because it was easier than standing up to her. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. That doesn't make you a bad man, I said. It just means you've been afraid. He swallowed. She told me you were manipulating me, using the house to control us. I smiled faintly. I'm not asking you to choose a side, I said. I'm asking you to see the truth. He nodded slowly. She wants you to apologize, he admitted. To smooth things over. I won't, I said gently. He looked up, startled. Not even for me. For you, I corrected, because if I apologize now, you'll learn that love means erasing yourself. Tears filled his eyes, and that nearly broke me. I don't want to lose my family, he said. You won't, I replied, but you might lose the version of it that only survives by stepping on someone else. We talked for hours about his childhood, about the pressure he felt to keep everyone happy, about the quiet resentment growing inside him. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me longer than he had in years. I don't know what's going to happen, he said. Neither do I admitted. But whatever does, it will be honest. That night, my phone buzzed again, a message from my daughter-in-law. You've turned him against me. I didn't reply, because something had shifted, something fragile but real. She was losing control, and she knew it. And when control slips away from someone who's built their world on it, they rarely leave quietly. The next move would be hers, and I had a feeling it would be her most desperate one yet. There comes a moment in life when the noise fades, and all that's left is truth. It arrived for me on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was watering the small rosemary plant on the porch when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Mrs. Callahan, a woman's voice asked. Calm, professional. Yes, this is a mediator from the family court. Your daughter-in-law has requested a formal meeting regarding property rights and living arrangements. I closed my eyes, so this was her last card. I'll attend, I said, but not to argue. The meeting took place a week later in a modest office that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. My son sat beside me. She sat across the table, rigid, rehearsed, certain she still had the upper hand. She spoke first long and fast, about sacrifices, about expectations, about how I was withholding support and destabilizing the family. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply told the truth. I raised my son to be kind, I said, not compliant. I built my home to be a place of rest, not leverage. And I spent too many years shrinking so others could feel tall. The mediator listened carefully. Then came the documents. Ownership, boundaries, agreements made long before anyone thought to challenge them. The room grew quiet. For the first time, my daughter-in-law looked small, not powerless, just exposed. This isn't what I expected, she muttered. It rarely is, I replied. The outcome wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slamming doors, just clarity. She left knowing the house was never hers to take. My son left knowing he could no longer stand in the middle and call it peace. Weeks later, he told me they were going to counseling. I don't know where we'll end up, he said, but I know I can't pretend anymore. I smiled. That's how healing starts. Now, as I sit by the sea again, I understand something I wish I'd learned sooner. Kindness without boundaries is not love. Silence is not sacrifice. And age does not make a woman small. It makes her clear. If you're listening to this and wondering whether it's too late to choose yourself. It isn't. It never was. Thank you for being here and listening. If this story touched you, please tap the like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. And if you feel comfortable, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from or sharing a small part of your own story.